Today let's have a look at mastering precision cuts. Now some of you would jump on your saw and make a cut, maybe a couple 45s, you get all done, put everything together, you have a problem with your miter. You say, I have it set perfectly to 45 degrees. There's no reason that isn't 45 degrees. Well, there's two things that's probably working against you. One, you may not have some sandpaper at the front of your gauge. This is some 320 that's put on with 320 grit that's put on with two-phase tape. It's on everything I own. It's just the way I do things. The best part about it is you won't get any sliding left to right now. But the only problem left over is the slop itself in the mechanism. Now, just that little bit of walk, when you multiply that out times 4 different cuts, let's say you put together a frame for a picture, you now have something that just doesn't fit perfect. And if you don't have sandpaper on your face, chances are, while you were mitering that 45, it tractored, it pulled in to the miter while you were cutting the piece, and now your edge probably isn't perfectly flat anymore. It might be at 45 degrees, kind of, but it's not really flat. So the problem then is take care of the sliding, and then what you need to do is lock down somehow your rail so that it's running true in here. Well, I found a method that does work. It doesn't last forever, but it does work. If you have one of the inexpensive fences out there, what I did is I took mine apart until I just had the metal bar laying on my table. I then took a center punch and went along the sides of it, and you have to pay attention on your table saw how much vertical surface is really here so that your center punches will end up in the middle of that vertical surface. And I did those lightly on here, and then I flipped it over and did them on the other side. When I put it in here, it was incredibly, slop-free. But it only lasted for about 2-3 years. But to be really fair, I used the heck out of this versus the other one. When you need absolute insane accuracy, I go for this. I don't need insane accuracy most of the time. I just need it good. So this has been working out really well. But now it's back to a little sloppy too. So do you do it again, right? Okay, so let's look at another way that you can take care of that too. By the way, if you guys are wondering why my fences have these huge blocks of wood, it's because I don't carry the slot through in the back of my table. I didn't want anything back there for anything to trip over and mess up the formica or dirt to get in there and have to clean it out all the time. So that's why I do that. All right, next let's look at accuracy while you're using one of these fences. What can you do to make it better yet? Now, as I mentioned, there is sandpaper along the front of this surface here. All right? Now, one thing I just did in the last year or so, if I can find the pieces here off camera, these parts are about 2 millimeters thick, just over a 1/16, and I mean barely. These are what is behind this screw and this screw, or what was behind there. And because it's, glorified tin foil with 1.5 threads in it, I just didn't feel that that was as strong as it could be or as rigid as I could make the fence. So I just took I have small pieces that I made on mine now. I'll actually show you one, that are just pieces of steel that are thicker. And you don't have to be crazy about this or do anything special. They're just small pieces of steel. Deburring the edges slightly is a good thing, for sure. But now, you don't have any more flex because of these in the system when you have long pieces of wood that you're trying to miter. So step one for me was to minimize what I knew was flexing slightly when I used really long pieces. Because you could see this fence would move very slightly, carrying the extra weight along the edge. Now it did stop quite a bit once I put this other fence over here that moves, because then it can carry some of the weight. But you guys might not have that option. So this might be something you might think about. Next, let me put this back together, and then I'm going to show you another trick of how to really tighten down accuracy with this while you're cutting pieces. Okay, number one, I would like to talk about just doing some small cutoffs. Let's say that this is the piece you want here, and you're going to run this through. By the time you get to the back side, it's going to leave that little nib on the end, right? And then there's a chance that it can come back and twist around as it hits the blade and maybe shoot it out also. So I don't use that method anymore, although I must admit I did. I use some type of spoil board that's always considerably higher than the part you're going to use, so that when the blade comes through, you're not going to cut this off too. And I always stop short, so this side looks a lot worse than this side does. Okay, so while you're doing that, now you can hold the second piece as you run through. It has no nib on it, and it is what you would consider to be perfect. But there's another problem. I have sandpaper on this surface, so it holds very well to this board, very well. Now you're putting this on here. Well, you can't put sandpaper on this face because then it's going to hit your blade and dull your blade. Well, you could put sandpaper either side of it, but then you know what I mean. Okay? So I've come up with another trick, and that is pretty simple. You take this actual stick, and you take a really fine water mister, okay? And I mean something that really atomizes nicely, not something that throws drops of water. And then what you want to do is give this a light misting. And I can't do this on camera, although I will show you what I'm going to do off camera because I don't want it on my saw. All right, that's the finish you get. There's barely any water on it at all. But when you have this here and this here, now all of a sudden things stick. It's incredible how well it works. So now this piece isn't going to go towards the blade at all. It can't. And every now and then you'll have to re-wet this because it's not going to last that long. But it puts a light, you can see how this is still dark, a light tack on the wood. And that's all you need. Does it transfer to the second piece? So minimally, it's unbelievable. And I can show you with another piece. Let me see, I think you can kind of see this off camera. So I can kind of do this down here. All right, so I have that wet. You can see where my thumb was over that one area. You put this on here, and now you can literally slide the board against the sandpaper. It holds that good. How about that? Now, as it dries out, you're going to have to do it again. But real gentle misting works so well, it's truly incredible. The thing I do here for my cutoffs, you can either move the fence all the way out, some of you can do this, or you can actually put a short piece of fence on. I also have that. Or you can clamp on just a piece of wood to the edge of your fence. So you have something, a block, if you will. And then this is always going to come over to your block, and then you're going to move forward so that you never have anything on the other side. You always want room for your cutoff to be able to move around. If you trap it between the fence and the blade, there's going to be trouble. So you always want a block clamped to the fence, or your fence moved back, or something that's going to help you from keeping that from happening. Now, let's have another look at a really good thing that these people did to this miter gauge to keep it tracking well in the slot. Let's have a closer look on that. All right, you can see here in this picture that these screws are being forced through a nylon insert that's been split. And because that insert has been split and it's chamfered underneath the screw at 82 degrees, the tighter you tighten that screw, the more it wants to kick this ear out. It has nowhere to go over here. It's completely trapped on this side. But this side, it could get bigger if you tighten that screw more. So they did 8 of these along the whole unit itself underneath. And that keeps it centered so that your slop is 0 if you have it adjusted right. Let's have a look at another thing that'll help you. A nice stop fastened to your frame. Some of you guys have the ability to put attachments on top of your fences. I decided what would be good, let's have a wider look over here. I decided what would be good is to not only use one, but to join one with the second and put another little adjustment knob in so that now it's incredibly accurate. It can't move. Not only are these slop free due to the tension that's on them, I'm sharing the load to make sure it just can't move. And then this block is put on here very tightly with the other screw that's here. And last but not least, let's talk about what I call miter tractoring. And that's all about when you put an angle on a piece of wood that isn't dead on, it's going to want to pull it in the angle you're trying to cut. So even if you're going to try to hold it by hand really tightly, sometimes you're going to find it's going to move anyway, and you're going to get either a burn at the end of the cut, or you're going to see the cut is no longer level, square, plumb, and true because it did move. Adding sandpaper really helps. It takes care of the problem. But again, if you guys need to have a spoil board in between, definitely take your spoil board, give it a sanding coat so that you don't have any saw marks on it, so it's fairly smooth. And then just give it a few light mists of water, and you're going to find out it works so well, it's incredible. You guys give this a shot. Let me know what you think, and you take care.